and watch like Fox News, and it hurts my head to do it, but to see what the other extreme side of the aisle is thinking, and I'll look at much more sort of moderate conservative and moderate liberal news sources as well. And then of course, like CNN and MSNBC, but I try to get that spectrum so that I can truly read between the lines on certain things. So that in terms of the information flow, you have to diversify your information flow and your information in.
Yeah. Cole,
what's up, bro?
Thanks for being on the podcast.
Absolutely.
So, man, tell the audience, a little bit about yourself. I know you do a lot of things for someone at you're 20, right?
Yes.
You've obviously done a ton for a 20-year-old, more than most 20-year-olds. I'm super impressed. I wish I was as productive as you are when I was 20. But yeah, no, give us a little background. Who is Cole? What are you trying to bring into the world?
For sure. Well, that's a loaded question.
Super loaded.
But I'm gonna do my best to keep it pretty succinct. Yeah, man, Cole is just a kid from Southside Minneapolis, and it was cool because I was actually walking down here. We're on Lake Street, on Lake Street and Lagoon, and I used to hang out uptown all the time, and I still do, but not in the same way I did as a kid. Just getting into trouble and just like throwing shit from roofs and like, can I swear in this podcast?
Yeah,
cool.
Yeah,
throwing shit from roofs, causing problems, yelling at people, fucking, it was a lot of fun. But I'm looking around, I'm like, man, even just in a few years, everything's kind of changed. But yeah, Cole is just a kid from Southside Minneapolis, grew up on Lake Street, and I'm just a product of two, parents who had crazy ADHD and was trying to figure out life just as much as I was. We were all kind of winging it. And yeah, dude, I just had a lot of, it seemed unfortunate at the time, but now I see them as fortunate experiences to be growing up around a very, very diverse, multicultural community, to actually be around so many Black and Latino-owned businesses that inspired me to be a hustler and, put back on for my community. Those were kind of my big inspirations in the beginning. Yeah. And also just being, having being biracial, right? So having a Black and Latino mom and then a white dad, and just kind of seeing the different, all that. So really, that experience is what turned me into who I am now. And I tell people now I'm just a kid and they don't accept that anymore. But now I'm an artist, an activist, an entrepreneur. I screw the word activist. I'm an organizer, really, a community organizer. I like to get in there, get the community to tell their story and use their voice, and then tell it to people in power to make a difference. So that's what caused me to start Bridge Makers, which is all about empowering youth voice and leadership to essentially bridge America's toughest gaps. So I'm talking about generational wealth gaps, partisan political gaps, and our educational opportunity and achievement gaps. So really just allowing people to access to, this podcast is all about human potential. It's to achieve their human potential.
100%.
So I'm obsessed with that.
So talk a little bit about, what you've already done to that end, because I know, back when COVID was going on, you saw a pretty major problem that you set out to solve with the team that then became Bridge Makers. Tell us a little bit about, what happened there.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, shout out, we're doing double drinks today because I couldn't choose one. We got the Nitro in one hand. We got the...
Shout out WeWork.
I don't even know. Shout out WeWork.
Not sponsored, but if y'all want to sponsor me, I would not say no.
That'd be a big bag. That'd be a crazy bag. If y'all want to sponsor. Yeah, so I most of the things that I started, kind of started out of necessity, and I think the best entrepreneurial ventures come from just a problem. So the big problem for me was, again, a little bit of background. I grew up pretty poor. I had a really loving family, and I always had clothes on my back, and I always ate, and shout out to my mom for doing that for me. But we were broke, no lie. And so I've been working for since I was probably 14 different odd jobs and everything, coffee shops, bike shops, flipping hamburgers, doing all the things teenage boy does as a job.
Yeah.
And so it's no stranger to me to be a contributing member of the economy and the society. And so in COVID, I was in a situation where I was kind of just getting I was just kind of getting back on my feet after getting in a bunch of trouble during high school. I got arrested, I got expelled and all this. You know, my dad is just coming out of treatment, and so he had like no money left going into it. And so I'm like just trying to get back on my feet, and like, you know, it was a tough time, no lie. And then in 2020, in the middle of me like just thinking I'm like getting back there, you know, the pandemic hit, and I lost my job. All my buddies lost their jobs. Everybody was losing their jobs. But you know, we ended up finding out, it's like when I actually applied for unemployment benefits, I got my money, and you know, I got back on my feet. I put food in the fridge, and I you know, got the internet up and everything, and paid the rent and all that. They sent me a letter saying I had to pay it all back, and the reason why is because I was technically still a high school student. I had like 3 months left. That was it. If I had dropped out of high school, they would have let me keep the money.
So if you had dropped out of high school and you were the same age you were, they would have let you keep all the money. But because you were enrolled in high school, trying to continue your education, they were trying to make you pay it back.
Bro, I could have been 14 and dropped out of high school, and they would have given me the money.
That's crazy.
It's insane. So I was like, fuck this. I was like, I didn't want to, you know, I had been kind of screwed over by the government and watched my people get screwed over by the government, you know, for my whole life. And I was sick of it. At this point, I didn't even really think I was going to make a difference. I'm going to be so honest with you. I was just like, I'm going to make it difficult for them. They are going to wish that they did not fuck around with my money. So in doing that, I met my co-founder and now one of my like best friends, Walter Cortina, and another group of incredible young people like Lincoln McCall and like Esteban Castillo, and like all these incredible young people who have been affected by this issue. And bro, I tell you, when I got into this first Zoom call, number one, it's the first time I downloaded Zoom. I'm like, Zoom, what? I got into this first Zoom call with Walter, and he's talking to like politicians and like executive directors of nonprofit organizations. Shout out to Youth Prize, by the way. Shout out to Children's Defense Fund. Shout out to you know, Project for Pride of Living, all the nonprofit, you know, folks who help us out. Bro, I was just blown away. I'm like, yo, I want in, right? I want in. And we basically, I tell people, I went from knowing every drug dealer in the city to knowing every elected official in the state. I built a bipartisan coalition. At the time, Minnesota was the only state where the Republicans had the Senate and the Democrats had the House, so they had to agree in order to get anything passed. We got them to agree after 9 hard months of fighting back and forth and having tough conversations, and we got the law changed, and it turned out to be over like $35 million that we put back into people's hands.
So you got $35 million put back into the hands of high school students who needed it.
Yes.
It's crazy. It's huge, and kudos.
Dude, I had people calling me like crying, like, yo, I can find, like, I can go back to college now, or like, I don't have to be homeless now, or I can actually afford my cancer medication now. And one girl, she was going back to college, she was like, yo, you want my old car? And I was like, yeah, it was a shitty car, but I'm like, I'll take it.
Yeah.
So take that. Let's go. This is dope.
That's amazing. So,
so do good in the community, you might get a free car.
That's the only reason. No, that's super dope, and it's also really cool that, like you said, you were able to create a bipartisan coalition and get people working together to actually accomplish something. Because so often, like, I have a nonprofit too, and you know, we're setting up some work together and everything with Smart North, but just being around that space, like, so often everything gets politicized and everything gets like put into these boxes of like, you know, we gotta accomplish this for this community because of this agenda, and then this, you know, there's just so many, there's so much that takes away from actually solving problems and helping people. And so the fact that you were able to just kind of cut through all that bullshit and get something done is impressive, and we need more people like that.
Oh yeah, and I think I try to make that a message for my generation too, because like, I think that it's really weird, man. Like, I talk to a lot of older folks, and they're like, it didn't used to be like this, like politics. It didn't used to be like this, you know. People used to reach across the aisle and make compromises, and you know, we wouldn't get everything we wanted, whether we were Democrat or Republican, but we'd come to something that worked. And it's not like that anymore, they say. And it's like crazy to think that people my age, our introduction to politics started with like Trump, which was like, apparently that's like the moment where they say everything went to shit, you know?
Yeah.
So for us as young people, I think it's so easy to look at it in the media and just kind of hate the other side. like, you know, we're in the middle of the inner city right now. We grew up here, so like mostly everyone I'm surrounded by is like very liberal, right? But I don't hate conservatives. Like a lot of people seem to just immediately hate conservatives, and vice versa. Conservatives hating liberals. We have strengths on both sides, and we have blind sides on both sides. And for us to work together and come to compromises is actually truly to make better solutions happen. You know, more comprehensive, more inclusive solutions. So.
And so how do we, I mean, given that, you know, obviously we are very divided post-Trump, you know, all the pandemic, everything that's happened.
Murder,
it's just it's been one thing after another. It feels like these past few years, and just being in a social media world, social media, I believe, you know, personally at least, that social media is inherently divisive because it puts us in these bubbles where you know, we're just reflecting our own opinions and stuff back at ourselves. And so how do we, you know, as a 20-year-old who's already been able to get things done, how do you see us getting more people to come together, and how does Gen Z play a role in that?
Yeah, so, you know, one thing that's really important is you kind of become some of the things that you consume. And so we talk about social media playing a huge role. Social media doesn't just play a huge role into our political ideology, but social media actually plays a big role into our personality, the types of people that we hang out with, the types of people that we don't hang out with, you know, how our relationships go. I mean, it influences so much about it. So you really do have to be very mindful of the type of information you're taking in. You kind of have to ask yourself sometimes, is this blindsided? Is this toxic, what I'm looking at? And to bring in a sort of diverse amount of things. I actually, every once in a while, I will actually go and watch like Fox News, and it hurts my head to do it, but to see what the other extreme side of the aisle is thinking. And I'll look at much more sort of moderate conservative and moderate liberal news sources as well. And then, of course, you know, like CNN and MSNBC, but I try to get that spectrum so that I can truly read between the lines on certain things. So that in terms of the information flow, you have to diversify your information flow and your information intake. You also have to be careful how much of that shit you take in, because it is just a lot of the times garbage. But and then on top of that, once you can kind of get that down, not to say do that before this, you should do both of them, but talk to people you don't agree with. And for us, a lot of times you can start by talking to your grandparents. Talk to your grandparents and see how they think about the next election, you know, or the next, or whatever, about certain issues, and take a deep breath, calm yourself before you do it, because some of the things you might hear might piss you off, but you're talking to your grandparents, right? So it makes it a little bit easier to empathize and think about, okay, let me put myself really in their shoes. All right, so they grew up at a time way before this, way before the things I had and the luxuries I had and the information I had, the benefit of having, blah, 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 blah. So you can kind of go back and like really put yourself in their shoes and just understand that their reality is as real as yours. So yeah, man, I know that was a lot to say, but basically talk to people you don't agree with and genuinely try to put yourself in their shoes. Don't get mad at them, and diversify your information flow.
No, I mean, that's the thing that you said there. Their reality is as real as yours is really profound, because it's so easy to forget that we're all living in our own reality.
Exactly, bro. Like, we're all objectively a little bit wrong. Right. You know? Like, so
if you think you're 100% right, you're definitely wrong.
Yes, then you're very delusional. Yeah, that's the big thing. It's about humbling yourself, you know? Because I'm just as crazy to, you know, dude on the other side as he's crazy to me, but if we can actually like have a real human conversation and, you know, be able to break bread with people you don't agree with, that's how we actually have a more inclusive and better society.
And you think, you know, I'm 27, so we're slightly close, but slightly different generation. Mm-hmm. You know, do you think your generation, the 19, 20-year-olds, 21-year-olds right now, is that, you know, do you see people trying to come together? Do you see your generation, hopefully, you know, maybe setting different trends as you emerge as leaders? Or is it, you know, still tough?
Some of us, but it's still tough. I'm not going to lie. I think a lot of us are really, really stuck in our own world. And a lot of that has to do with social media. and a lot of it has to do with the fact that we're just like a lot of times in an echo chamber,
Mm-hmm.
right? Especially like in like prestigious universities, it's just an echo chamber where people are vilified for having different opinions, right? So it's like the other thing is like, you know, they always say that politics is like a horseshoe. Like if you have liberal and like conservative on this side, they kind of go out, but then they start to come together the more extreme they get. Because the more extreme they get, you're essentially just like the exact opposite of actual classical liberalism. You're essentially trying to shut out other people's ideas and be intolerant of other perspectives and try to sort of honestly lower and subjugate a class of people for having a different opinion than yours. And that's the same on both extreme sides of the spectrum. Responsibility, and where I think that responsibility lies is for us to be problem solvers, and what a problem solver really is an entrepreneur, right? And that word entrepreneur, I've started saying this a lot because I've started realizing the reality of it. It sounds super sexy, and it can be super sexy, but entrepreneurship is about problem solving, making your community better, and reinvesting into your community and being accountable to that community. Otherwise, you're a crook, and we see plenty of those, right? We see plenty of people who manipulate capitalism to extract resources from communities, and we see how that goes. But I would say that's exactly it. It's our job to sort of, we can have systems, change policies, but it's our job to push those systems by innovating, by generating resources, solving problems for our community, and reinvesting back in that community so that we can actually eventually make decisions free of those systems or heavily influence those systems because we have resources and their existence shapes our how, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes human beings have the very same what, but that how is where we have to have real conversation rather than just fight each other.
Well, that how is, I mean, that's what makes us unique, right?
Yeah.
It's like we may all want similar things, but how we get there is different.
And we gotta it's like, we actually do have to let different communities have different hows, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's sort of, I don't know, man. I mean, the further you get into politics, the further you realize, like, a lot of the things with really good intentions, end up being just, like, too far-reaching, and it just ends up being government overreaching. So when I say other communities should be able to have different hows, it's like literally something that might work for, like, Minneapolis doesn't work for St. Paul. And that's why our two cities have different laws and different taxes and different programs around different things. And we should let that be rather than having the state or the federal government impose nominally, kind of the same across, different communities. Now, I think people need to be protected under basic human rights, of course. There has to be a baseline that we all agree is like just human decency, but then beyond that.
I'd love to get your opinion on this. So, like, I know you've actually like won some court battles and made tangible efforts to fix problems in a broken system. I think, and that's very important. I think that oftentimes, like, young people, though, get sucked into the problems that they see in these systems instead of, like, actually looking to how do I create the future, how do I do something new, right? Because, like, if you get it's like oftentimes I've seen, people come out of college and they're like, I'm an activist, I want to change the world, and they go spend 10 years in like as a lawyer or in some system, and then they're like all cynical, and we're like, what happened? It's like and their whole demeanor's changed, and it's not because they weren't genuine when they started, it's just they go indoctrinate themselves in a system, in a culture, and then they pick up the patterns, the thought patterns, the behaviors of that system because they were so focused on it.
Yeah. So there's a reason that Bridgemakers focuses on, like, we have our programs that help young people be civically engaged, but also we have programs that help young people basically start their own businesses or get into innovative careers that they're interested in. Mm-hmm. And the reason I do it like that and that we do it like that is because to answer that exact question, how do we actually make a difference without indoctrinating ourselves into just this system? And what I have to say is the government can't fix everything, and stop fucking waiting on the government to do everything, because that's where our generation also gets stuck up, not stuck up, but like stuck in, is we kind of think of policy and just like is like the fucking answer to everything. It's really not. Like, we as people have a certain responsibility, and where I think that responsibility lies is for us to be problem solvers, and what a problem solver really is an entrepreneur, right? And that word entrepreneur, I've started saying this a lot because I've started realizing the reality of it. It sounds super sexy, and it can be super sexy, but entrepreneurship is about problem solving, making your community better, and reinvesting into your community and being accountable to that community. Otherwise, you're a crook, and we see plenty of those, right? We see plenty of people who manipulate capitalism to extract resources from communities, and we see how that goes. But I would say that's exactly it. It's our job to sort of, we can have systems, change policies, but it's our job to push those systems by innovating, by generating resources, solving problems for our community, and reinvesting back in that community so that we can actually eventually make decisions free of those systems or heavily influence those systems because we have resources and their existence is dependent on our taxes, our support, our whatever. So yeah, man, I mean, it's just, entrepreneurship doesn't have to be, you don't have to, bootstrap and start a company out of your garage and eat ramen noodles for 10 years until you eventually IPO and sell your company. That's not really usually the entrepreneurial
That's
journey.
one model.
It's one model, and it's like, those are like crazy people that do that model, right? And shout out to them, but that's like the most extreme, right? It's what you're doing. It's what my boy, Brady's doing by just recording this, and it's just inserting yourself into a situation where you provide value, right? And once you start to do that, you stop needing the government or to go to the policymakers to constantly ask for and beg for the things that we want. You start to generate it for yourself.
Yeah, no, I love that, and I mean, providing value means you're focused on other people, right? And I think a lot of people are very focused, and I have been at times in my life too. I mean, we all have, but I think a lot of people are very focused on themselves, and so they naturally, right? And through especially like if you're in an environment where you have scarce resources and you had to struggle to survive, like that's understandable that you have this protective mechanism. But at a certain point, like I think we got to create, and I love what you're doing with Bridgemakers. I think we got to create more communities where people feel psychologically safe enough to like open up and start looking to just give and help others and create value without like looking over their shoulder, seeing who's going to come, take something from them.
And that's another thing too, is there's always going to be those, there's always going to be people that want to exploit you. That's just kind of
reality.
A reality. I think we've all been less than our highest moral character before, and those people that are going to be out to exploit you, they're hurting too, right? They're not doing it, usually because they hate you, but because out of scarcity and necessity themselves. So you have to be able to recognize that. But you also, I think it is really important not to just be super skeptical all the time, because you just build barriers for yourself doing that stuff. You're totally right. We need to make psychologically safe environments, and I don't know, man. It kind of comes down to just being like compassionate human beings and being good to each other, and yeah, man. I mean, it really goes back to that point about breaking bread with people that you disagree with, like leaning into discomfort and disagreement and consensus building is what comes out of that. Leaning into that is an uncomfortable process, but it breeds creativity and honesty and beautiful environments. And that's the process of both the things we just talked about, making change politically or entrepreneurship. You have to consensus build.
Yeah, so talk about, more tactically what you're doing. You were telling me as we were walking in some, off that topic, some stuff that you're tactically working on right now with Bridgemakers, like really activating people and working with policymakers, et cetera. Can you talk about a little bit of the work that you're focused on right now and how you're going about that?
Yeah, and I have a few things. Like Bridgemakers is my main deal right now. That's what that's what I spend most of my time on. But I got a few ventures, and they're all really focused on, like, I like how you said, like, about being tactical, because I really do try to be strategic, and I try to make sure that the actions that I'm taking right now are going to cause positive effects 10 years down the road, right? There's a really good thing. It's kind of morbid, but it's really solid, and it keeps you very focused. It's called the epitaph test, right? So, you know, an epitaph is just like the one sentence that's on your gravestone.
Mm-hmm.
You got about one sentence there. That's all you got. So every time you're doing something, if you're not sure you're using your time the best, think, is what I'm going to do right now going to contribute to what's going to be on my epitaph, how people are going to remember me? And if not, you know, maybe do something else, right? Depending on what kind of legacy you want to leave. And so, yes, I think that's really important, and I'll get right into it. On the Bridgemaker side of things, a lot of what I'm doing actually stems from this. I'll kind of give the problem first. And the problem is that, you know, I love entrepreneurship and I'm like a big proponent of it, but don't get me wrong, I do think that the current landscape of the market and its relationship with our government, and most people just say, you know, it's capitalism, but I mean, truly we have sort of a mixed economy, and the way that it's mixed is bad. In a lot of ways, some people call it crony capitalism, whatever. But basically, we've created a machine that extracts natural resources from the earth, turns it into dust and toxic waste, and exploits people. To be quite frank, that's like a lot of our economic system in a lot of parts of the world, and it's you know, I mean, it's also not. We also don't want to have, you know, communist Russia, where we're just basically like enslaving people almost, like to do exactly what our economy's planning to do and nothing else, right? And you got problems on both of those sides, right? And what I see us doing right now is we're moving to the other extreme, where we're exploiting people through capitalism, and even more important is how it's affecting the earth. And the other thing that I'm scared for is automation, right? So automation, you know, the jobs that I was able to do as a young person to get on my feet are the ones that are going away the fastest. And they're the ones that most people are actually able to jump into and able to do anything with. I mean, the people who are most under-resourced, all they can do is, you know, not all they can do, but, you know, you got like truck driving, you've got food service, you've got like all these different jobs. We've already got West Coast and East Coast, they got restaurants that are just like serving burgers and soup without any employees. It's just robots doing it. You got self-driving trucks. There was that huge strike in Canada. Automation is coming. I mean, most of the jobs that the school system was modeled after, manufacturing and just like these.
Most of them are already
automated, right? So if you kind of take that extreme, you see the direction we're going with that. Eventually, all those entry-level jobs that we had, we're not going to be left with anymore. And people who are already under-resourced, who have already been like literally historically subjugated through economic policy, and whose family, you know, 3 generations ago didn't have 2 dimes to rub together and still don't have 2 dimes to rub together, they're going to fall flat on their face. And it's going to be really bad. So with that being said, what I'm focused on is changing our education system to get ahead of that problem and start teaching people for what that future economy is going to look like. Yeah. And I don't fully know what that future economy is going to look like, but we need to start thinking about it. We need to start getting policymakers and the smartest people in the country and our entrepreneurs and our students all together figuring it out.
Yeah.
We need to teach people how to be independent thinkers, because even in bridge makers, like the biggest skill I hire for is the ability to independently think and problem solve. They don't teach you that in school, but they teach you how to, you know,
just creative thinking, emotional intelligence, communication, yeah.
So I'm really focused on sort of the future of the economy and preparing people for that. And the other thing that's sort of my heart and my soul and what I'm really passionate about on another level is I'm actually a musician, and I have a really, basically to put it in simple terms, I'm bullish on creativity, right? So yeah. I think that as we do start to automate a lot of the sort of routine, mundane, boring tasks, more and more as a society, we're going to have our basic needs met. And the thing about the economy is it's just our, you know, our silly human way of extrapolating this idea of value. So the value is going to shift. It's not going to all go away. We're just going to value different things.
It's just a different game.
So we're going to value the things only humans can do, which is creatively express themselves and, you know, connect in a human way. So it's going to be really weird because we're going to end up, I don't know, I think there's going to be a lot of, there's going to be a big explosion in the social and creative economy, basically. And so along with Bridge Makers, I'm trying to help people for the future of the economy. And then my business, which is just a recording studio and sort of like a, we call it Club Concrete. So it's basically like a club country club for creatives, right?
That's dope.
And so yeah, just bringing community together for the purpose of creating things and making businesses out of our craft. That's what I'm doing on the Club Concrete side, and I'm just bullish that that section of the economy is going to explode.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, and I've said before, and I will say it again. Like, I think as more and more things get automated, we'll end up entering the age where the artist is actually like the most valued skill set or persona, because really what's going to be valuable if all the technical stuff, you know, computers are writing our code, robots are doing our manual labor, right? It's really going to be our ability to envision things and bring them into reality, and then our ability to create dope experiences and communicate with each other. And so, yeah, I totally agree. So we got time for one more question here, and I really am curious, because you're obviously an activator. You obviously have brought together a lot of networks and a lot of people and helped them work towards a common goal. How do you, or what would your message be to Gen Z, to people who are in their teens right now that, you know, want to do something meaningful but maybe just don't think they have a voice or don't think they have any power right now?
Yes. Number one, delete Snapchat for a week, see what happens. Delete TikTok for a week, see what happens. I'm so serious. Like, definitely helps my mental health a lot. But okay, I would say this is how I did it. This is my process. Number one, you have to stop caring about other people seeing your progress, because they won't see your progress until you start popping, and then they'll see it. But you have to be, you know, excited about that yourself. So you're gonna be doing those invisible push-ups for a long time. That's what I call them, because you're making progress, but nobody see the gains. Nobody sees it. You're gonna be doing those for a long time, and that might look like working on your mental health. That might look like being a better, friend, or being, working on yourself as a person in your relationships with people, because that will be important for the rest of your life. Doing those invisible push-ups, and then when you get into it, man, you're not gonna know what you want to do right away, but just explore, and if you like 10 different things, try them all, and probably only 2 are going to come out being things that you really, really love doing and can do over and over again without anybody telling you to. And when you find those things, man, do them. Do it fast, fail forward, do it while you're young, because you cannot take the same risks that you can when you're 30 and you got a mortgage to pay and you got kids and you got a significant other and they're planning on you being home for dinner and all that. So if you're young, most people watching this will be pretty young.
Yeah.
This is the time, man. This is the time to make all the mistakes. I have made mistakes now at this age that if I had made when I was 40 would be like the start of the midlife crisis. But I'm able to keep going because I don't have a mortgage to pay.
That's
and I can go back to living in a dingy apartment for a while if I ever needed to get back on my feet.
Yeah, no, I love it. I think 20 should be the highest risk time of your life. Sure. No, well, I really appreciate everything you do for the community here in Minneapolis, St. Paul, Cole, and you're obviously already an inspiration to a ton of young people. So keep doing what you're doing, and we'll definitely get back on for one of these conversations again sometime soon.
We'll have to do like the update conversation, because right now we're building a bunch of stuff. This is going to be like round 2 of Bridgemakers, everybody. So this next upcoming year, we're going to have so many opportunities to engage. But, stay tapped in, bridgemakersmn.org, and then all our socials are on there. But yeah, thank you for having me, Will.
Of course.
Thanks for having these conversations about human potential and the future. And thank you guys for watching.
Next time.
All right.
Appreciate you.
Yeah, that was sick. That was fun, because usually when I do shit like this, I have to be so succinct and prepared.
It's casual. It's just like raw. I think you get more real stuff out.